Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for attending this work session. I'd like to call to order the Brunswick City Commission work session dated Wednesday, March the 17th. It's a virtual teleconference via Zoom. We have one item on our agenda for this evening, and this is a discussion. Director of Planning and Zoning, John Hunter, Mr. Ross Moraine, Special Projects Manager, Coastal Regional Commission, and Eric Landon, Director of Planning and Government Service, Coastal Regional Commission, to give a presentation regarding proposed zoning ordinance revision, our phase one. Mr. Hunter, you can start it off and then we can pass it on to the individuals.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Appreciate you taking the extra time to get updated on a project we've been working on now for about 11 months. And that is our zoning ordinance revision. As y'all recall, just under a year ago, we contracted with the Coastal Regional Commission to give us the support to take a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance, provide us some recommended updates, and really get us up to a new standard under our zoning ordinance, and look at all aspects and how we can streamline things and also make improvements so that as we go forward with new development in Brunswick, we're able to do so in an efficient manner. Russ Moran is with us from the Regional Commission tonight to really walk us through the updates that we've gotten through so far in this first phase. We also have with us a number of our Planning Commission members, our Chairman Dave Bowers, our Vice Chairman Lance Saby, Dolores Harrison. We may have one or two others come online during the meeting that I've not seen yet, but they've all spent a great deal of time pouring through our zoning ordinance, and I think making some good recommended revisions. Most of them are related to definitions. A lot of it is just reorganizing what is there so it's more legible and more understandable for our residents and our businesses and developers. And Russ will be able to walk us through all of that. So, this is our opportunity to show you our work, but also an opportunity for us to get feedback from you as well, and help guide us as we continue through this process. So with that, I will turn it over to Russ, and we can get started.
Thank you, John. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe John has sent you the materials that involve these proposed changes to the zoning ordinance. The cover was a synopsis of all the changes, which summarized very briefly what was included in the rest of the package you probably received. We began this process with your zoning ordinance, you might recall, last fall. The initial thought was that we would go through the ordinance and find parts of it that needed to be updated in terms of definitions, standards for development. John had asked us to particularly look at the sign ordinance, buffers. And as we got into it, we realized that there were also probably some changes that would be appropriate to the specific zones that you have in the city, your residential, your office, commercial, industrial, medical zones, all of those. And John agreed. And so sort of halfway through the process, we decided, and again, we were also guided in part by the fact that we couldn't really have meetings with many people because of the pandemic that's going on. There were groups, like I think you may recall, we mentioned the possibility of creating an institutional zone that would embrace the hospital, the college, the high school, and the junior high in that area, that would establish a single zone for all of that and establish boundaries on that zone that would protect the neighborhoods that surround it all. There was really no way to get meetings together with the hospital, the college, the Board of Education, and others. So what we decided to do was to complete phase one with most of the structural changes and a few of the general provisions of the zoning ordinance that John thought needed attention right away. And then in phase two, we would get into the actual zones, the zoning map, the uses permitted, and so on. Just a general description, your zoning ordinance is an old ordinance. It was originally created in 1980, and it's been amended, re-amended, and re-amended many times, which has caused a lot of conflicts in the text. And in phase one, we attempted to address most of that. The rest we will do in phase two. As John indicated, we went through the definitions in the existing ordinance, found a number of them that were outdated. For instance, a gasoline service station. Those don't exist anymore. Nobody comes out to pump your gas or check your oil, wipe your windshield, make minor repairs. So we restructured that as an example of many definitions in the zoning ordinance that needed attention. We addressed items like conditional uses, which several members of the city commission mentioned that you had far too many requests for conditional use approval for this, that, and the other, and that needed to be straightened out. Well, we have attempted to do that, I think you'll notice. The use or development or added accessory buildings to residences, garages, garage apartments, if they're going to be permitted, or guest houses over garages, was not adequately dealt with in the ordinance, and we did deal with that. Not in terms of permitting them, but defining what they are and how they would be developed if they were permitted. A few other things like outdoor storage that wasn't defined properly. You would want temporary storage to be allowed around a construction site. And there is a definition for that now. Permanent storage requires certain permanent buffering and screening from adjacent properties. We then looked at general regulations dealing with home occupations, simplified those. There was a long laundry list of uses that were permitted and uses that were prohibited. And there were uses not mentioned, so it was difficult. It became a difficult thing for John to administer, so we cleaned that up. We also developed in the ordinance more charts to get away from verbiage so that the user who's trying to determine what they can and cannot do within a zone could go to a chart, look at it, and quickly determine what they need to do. Of particular interest to John was getting the sign ordinance straightened out. It apparently had been hammered away at many times and with lots of revisions. There were conflicts in it. It was very poorly organized and very hard for the user and for John to even administer. So we restructured the sign ordinance, made actually very few changes other than changes that many of you and members of the Planning Commission brought up, like signage in neighborhood commercial areas and that sort of thing. We also rewrote the buffer section of the ordinance to make it more current, more effective. It was a pretty weak section of the ordinance before. There were very few specifications, and it was kind of a guess as to what a buffer would end up being. So it's well defined now, and it should be effective. We will be going into phase 2 fairly soon. In fact, at the Planning Commission meeting last week, we distributed the very beginnings of that work. This is really where we're going to deal with uses, specific development standards for each zone, get into some of the details that many of you have asked about or raised questions about, and also begin to have meetings with stakeholders on issues like the development around the hospital, the college, the high school, the Altama Boulevard area that adjoins all of these, so that there's some unified planning and development occurring in those areas. We're going to look at density. We're going to look at possibly combining what's now called the commercial and residential core areas, and better define what the core area of Brunswick is, and determine with your help what kind of development standards need to be implemented in those areas to maintain the character of the city that you desire. That's pretty much a quick summary. I have to tell you that the Planning Commission was extremely helpful in this process. We had several meetings. A number of the Planning Commission members made written comments. Some were verbals. Mr. Bowers came out and even sat with me for a couple of hours and went through a lot of his concerns. But your Planning Commission worked very hard on this and had a lot of input. John, have I missed anything?
I don't think so, Russ. At least in summarizing what we've done, obviously now with the commission having seen some of this information, we know y'all are going to have questions and probably want to know a little bit of what our thinking was, or what in particular items that you don't see here that may be addressed in phase 2. So it's really a good point probably to open it up for beginning questions, and to walk through some of the changes that were made.
Well, I have some questions, so if
Go right ahead.
okay. Let me see what page this was on. Page 2, where it starts to talk about accessory apartment versus accessory guest house. I'm sure that's like splitting hairs when you try to define those two things, because one of them, basically says you can have as many as 3 rooms, which includes a bedroom, living area with a kitchen and a bathroom. So does that mean you can't have a bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and an open living area, almost no kitchen and a living space and a bathroom? And then the guest house says it shall have no cooking facilities. So I'm not sure if that means it can't have a stove. Does that mean it cannot have a refrigerator? I don't know if I didn't see anything that sort of defined what no cooking facility means, because people are going to push that one way or the other. So I'll pose that as my first question.
And before, Russ, real quick before you answer, Commissioner Martin, would you like me to share the document on the screen so everybody else can see when we're talking about a
I
specific
think that
session?
would be helpful if everybody else agrees. I mean, I've got it pulled up on my other computer, but maybe not everybody else does.
We tried to distinguish between a guest house and a quote unquote garage apartment. The guest house is not designed for permanent living. It's essentially a place where people might spend a few nights as though they were a guest in the house. It just happens that in certain instances, you might have someone with a carriage house that wants to use it as a guest room for a guest. As far as garage apartments are concerned, we limited it to 1 bedroom because of the size of the garage, the amount of parking. If you've got 2 bedrooms, you're most likely going to end up with 2 more cars parked in the backyard. And the next thing you know, you've got a backyard full of cars. That does not to say, and right now, those are not a quote unquote permitted use. So we'll be revisiting that when we get into the review of the specific residential zones. And we can deal with the size at that point. Typically, they're 1 bedroom with a separate bathroom and kitchen. A guest house might have a microwave and a little small refrigerator to keep water in, but it's not designed for someone to permanently live in it for 6 months to a year or something like that.
So how does that fit in? And I know some of this was sort of touched on and addressed in farther sections, but like an in-law suite, if you build an ancillary auxiliary accessory building, I guess, dwelling on the same property, detached, for your mother or your father who's aging and needs closer supervision, but is still independently living.
It's permitted as either an attached as part of the main structure or a addition or built as part of a garage. So it can be detached or attached.
Okay.
In other words, you could build a mother-in-law suite for independent living attached to a main structure, so long as it didn't exceed a certain square footage of the main house. Normally it's 25%.
But if it's not attached through a breezeway.
Well, it would be, the idea would be that it would be a detached structure. Normally they're built over a garage.
Except we don't have a whole lot of garages well, at least in the historic district. Now, that's different from the whole city, but.
Well, the thing you want to stay away from is creating an apartment situation in a single family neighborhood.
Okay.
And size has a lot to do with it. You start getting 2 bedroom apartments over garages or in auxiliary structures, and you're beginning to get pretty close to apartments and a density that exceeds the density desired for that particular neighborhood.
Okay.
You got to be careful with those things and keep the restrictions at a level that it doesn't violate the intent of the zone.
Hey, Russ, this is Johnny Cason. Could I add something? This was one of the things that I looked at too, and just like Julie's saying, we've got existing dwellings all over the south end. You've got them on Lanier Boulevard, where people have small outhouses, so to speak, that are for living. and they have accommodations for cooking. I don't see a problem with that myself. If somebody else does.
So one of the issues that we had in our existing code was that these type buildings were not really well defined. So our starting point really with this was creating these definitions so that whether we allowed them or did not allow them, we actually could define what they were. So say we're looking at Old Town in an area where we already have a lot of these existing, we're able to classify what those are and make a determination as a group. Yes, this is an appropriate area for us to have these, therefore it falls under the allowed use. Or we may come back and say an accessory apartment that is attached is okay in this area. But an accessory dwelling unit, you needed to be a conditional use and you need to have X number of square footage available on your lot to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think I see where you go, and I just know you've got this sort of thing existing all over the city.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And that's something.
I use Lanier Boulevard in the south end, but you have it is common to have an older parent, even a child that doesn't need to be in the main house. In Brunswick, Georgia, to have a place to domicile and have cooking, even though it's not a big elaborate kitchen, but to have something there. So
Right.
I know it exists all over. I can take you to,
And it does. And actually going back to our original approval, our original zoning ordinance that was created in 1929, accessory dwelling units were essentially allowed by right in all of our residential zones. And that's why we have them everywhere. Those weren't taken out until much later into the 80s. And then it was taken out in the 80s in our R6 and R9 and left in our general residential zoning. But then in 2000, I can't remember if it was 2008 or 2013, it was made a conditional use in the general residential. So those are some of the things that we're definitely looking at, and those particular uses and where they are, and where they should be allowed is a larger discussion for phase 2. The starting point for us is actually having the definition.
okay.
Okay, yeah, because I agree with Johnny and Julie, because I would like to see that broken out or defined a little bit more or explained a little bit more as we move into that phase 2.
Well, we need to be aware that we have an existing footprint that we need to not commit turmoil for here.
And being the person who gets to tell people no all the time, I will tell you that the way our ordinance is laid out right now, it gives you the impression that if you have them, they're illegal, which isn't true. But also that if somebody has let that lapse, it makes it very difficult for us to allow somebody to take an apartment that was maybe done in the 1960s but hadn't been lived in 30 years and re-add that space back to their property and make it usable again. So those are definitely some of the things we're trying to address.
Okay.
I would say, especially if it's a full size lot, 90 by 180, where you've got the lot, the land capacity to do something that's, an in-law suite or whatever. Because there used to be carriage houses. I mean, those were the garages of the day back then. So most of them were not 2-story, but I had another question on page 3, under the definition for boarding house. In the bold print towards the end of the definition where it says the landlord shall not provide supervision. So my question is, why would it be stated as the landlord? Shouldn't it just be any person? Like maybe there's a director of, whatever the programming might be for that resident's home. It's not the landlord. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah, run that by one more time, Commissioner.
Okay, you see the definition for boarding house on page 3.
Right,
Towards the bottom of that paragraph where it's in bold print and it says the landlord shall not provide supervision of persons, supervision of medications, assistance in
Right.
daily living. Okay.
Th-
Well,
that's, that's
use of the
defined
word landlord-
elsewhere.
I'm sorry.
That is defined elsewhere. That becomes a personal care home if the landlord is providing any supervision or care for any of the people in the house. The true boarding house would, the landlord would not provide any personal care.
Right. I understand what you're saying, but what if it's not the landlord who's providing supervision? It's somebody else.
I see what you're saying. So if
Well,
the property
okay.
owner actually then has a company that they hire to provide the services in the house, essentially.
Right. I think if
Landlord
we
is
use the
one
word
for like-
landlord, it's too limiting. Does that make sense?
Well, and remember that the landlord is the person who is collecting the rent. He or she owns the house, may not live there. I would assume they do. But that's why it's defined as landlord.
Right. But I think John understands what I'm saying, Russ.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. I do. So I think it could. I think that's a case where you could say something like the landlord or their agent
Yeah, or
shall not
professional,
provide
some kind of a
Right.
professional person
Okay,
Right. So
that's
so Russ, what
providing
we're
a
saying is,
service.
so what we're saying is to say the property owner leased out the house for the use of, say, a nonprofit who came in and provided those services. We're making sure that we're not creating a loophole for the owner to say, well, I leased that out.
Yeah, I have nothing to do with it.
I have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I understand exactly where Commissioner Martin
Okay.
is going.
And I'm sure you know some examples. So I think maybe that needs to be tightened up or whatever you might say. And I know parking for boarding houses was covered in a different area. Now, is there a reason that a boarding house such as that would not have to have a business license?
I always thought they were required to have business licenses, should have.
Well, I'm not seeing that as a requirement, so that's why I'm asking the question. Unless I've totally missed that.
I don't think I understand your question. I'm sorry.
But what she's saying, like, because it's a boarding house, why wouldn't they have to have a business license, like, a bed and breakfast or anything else?
Typically, they do currently.
That's what I thought. I thought there was something in the ordinance that said that they had to have a license.
So is that in a different section and
I
that's
believe
why
that's
it's
in
not
I
right
believe
there?
that's in a separate section. That's more in our licensing.
Let me ask this question, John and Russ. Wouldn't it be if we could put all this stuff in one concise area so that when a person is looking at the ordinance, they don't have to run every, step down. You follow what I'm saying?
So
So if we're
that's,
talking about boarding houses, let's.
yep. So that's actually something that we've already started looking at a little bit for phase 2. So basically what you would be able to do is we would have a usage chart, kind of a master usage chart that shows all of our allowed uses, allowed conditional uses. And then it basically be a checkbox, yes or no, as to whether it is allowed in that area. Is that where you were going to, Commissioner?
Yeah, in other words, if I'm gonna open a boarding house per se.
Yep.
Then everything that I would need to know as far as the boarding house and the requirements, everything that is right there in that concise area, rather than, okay, I got this section that says boarding house and I gotta turn to page 13 to find the next step. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, and some of that is difficult to do. If we actually did that for each one of these definitions, we would grow our ordinances by hundreds of pages. So by creating the definitions in one section and then having a kind of a unified usage chart in another, and then a parking chart that shows your parking allowances in each one of those areas. If you let me skip ahead a little bit here, it would be something similar to the chart that we see here. Let me zoom back out a little bit.
We did have the requirement, didn't it, John, that where we had bed and breakfast did require a business license. I'm
Right,
not
because
sure that, given that there are no services provided in a boarding house other than let someone sleep in a room, if I don't know, maybe we could put a business license requirement in it, but it changes it to a business at that point. You wouldn't probably allow it in a residential zone.
Well, it seems to me that it is a business because they're getting paid per boarder.
it is, and we treat them currently as businesses.
We could add that.
But if we need to clarify that in the definition, we can do that.
I think it would be good too, because in other places it states a business license is required.
Yeah, right up above there in the bed
Yeah.
and breakfast home, it's got that the business must be licensed by the city of Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's no question. I have a question on page 6
All righty, let me move back.
under junk or salvage yard towards the bottom of the page.
Commissioner Williams, did you get your question answered?
You're muted.
I said, I was just curious as to why we can't just put these things together in a neat form and say, okay, if if an individual comes, now that Julie brought that up, say they want to do a salvage yard. Everything that deals with a junk or salvage yard should be in a concise area so they don't have to run all over the place looking for what I need to do. Because what happens is people get frustrated when they come in, they think that they got everything done, and you turn to page 7 or page 8 and say, well, you didn't do this part. And you say it was in the ordinance. So if the ordinance is for junk and salvage, let's lay out everything that an individual would have to do to be able to do that in the zoning and whatever it requires.
You're suggesting then grouping the definitions by functions.
Correct.
Okay, we can look at that. We did that in the sign ordinance, if you remember, John.
Right.
In the sign ordinance part of that we revised, we grouped the definitions there by functions.
Right.
John, can I jump in just for a second? I can maybe help clarify a little bit.
Sure, Lance.
So yeah, Commissioner Williams, I think we all agree with your point, and I know on the planning side, we all, agreed with your position. John scrolled down there for a minute and showed an initial chart, but I think to clarify where we're at in this review process is that all without knowing, as you mentioned, like a salvage yard is a good example, without the layman or even us as a group knowing how we're defining or identifying salvage yard or boarding house, we don't know what chart or what section to go to, what category they fall under, if that makes sense. And then also how John and his team are going to enforce that. So this very first section that Russ has been going over in terms of the definition is just literally just that. This is what this category is, and this is what the definition is. And then it's going to refer to, if you fall in that category, here's where you go to find out all the applicable ordinances with that. Does that help a little bit?
That would be understandable. I mean, if you said, okay, if you're doing a boarding house, here's all the steps that you need to take for a boarding house. It's found on page so-and-so. They go to that page, they shouldn't have any questions as to what they're required to do when they come to City Hall to get a permit or whatever they need to get for that function.
But
and whether or not it's allowed or not allowed in the zone that they're trying to open their business or provide that service is the key. Yeah.
So it can be like a one-stop shop, and you click on salvage yards, and that will take you to everything dealing with the salvage yard licensing, whatever the zoning, all of that stuff will be in that one captured area.
So like if a person wants to open a used car dealership and they want to put it on Parkwood, well, it's not zoned for that. So, you know, they would get the areas that are zoned for that particular use, and then be able to go from there and be able to navigate it from there.
Commissioner Williams, I think that's a great recommendation that you're making for the planning committee to review and look at. I also think that in the second phase that we will consider that, so that it will be, if you wanted to open a certain business, the requirements will be under there. So we thank you for that. And I have noted it. So when we go into the meetings that we will make mention of it.
And I think that's great. And I understand what y'all are saying. And Russ or John that made the comment, it would take pages and pages of information because you have to repeat a lot of the information. I get that. I understand that. But I think maybe if for each of those definitions or those uses, you could say, please refer to chapter blah, blah, blah for signage, for parking, for, you know, whatever the other, you know, storage of materials, so that they know, okay, I need to visit these other parts of the ordinances in order to make sure that I'm in compliance with what I want to do. If that makes sense.
And it does. I'm scrolling down quickly. It's very similar to what we have done with the sign ordinance here, where on a single page, you can see exactly what different type of sign is allowed in which area within the city, and any notes about any limitations or any additional requirements that you may have there.
Yeah.
So it's really, we really almost have to do both, so that we lay out our regulations in a more verbal and long form. But these usage charts and locational charts are really the meat of what we would really recommend to people to be their starting point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think they're more user friendly. You can just like Commissioner Williams is suggesting. Where's a one-page, you know, hit list, and that's a great job right there.
We have already developed a format for the ones for each of the residential zones and the office commercial zones, which handle where uses are permitted and what the development standards are in chart form. So you can look for your use and figure and get everything you need, where it's permitted and what restrictions on development or what development guides are being imposed.
And what restrictions on licensing?
Is that a question
That's a statement.
or statement? Okay,
So that they'll know what restrictions are on their
Sure.
licenses too, when they apply for licenses.
And that's something we paid a good bit of attention to, in particular, looking at the whole issue we have with what we called previously a group dwelling, but it encompassed 5 or 6 different things that actually have popped up and are in existence within Brunswick, whether it is a sober living facility or something like Safe Harbor or or a boarding house. They were almost all kind of grouped in together. And there's certain ones of those that require state regulations and licensing in order to not only have a license to exist, but then they have standards that they have to meet in terms of how many rooms and do they have fire escapes and all of those type things. And having them in one defined area was really difficult for us to manage.
Yes, see, and that would have helped us with the situation with the well.
Correct.
yeah. So to go back to my question, now that we did fully answer Commissioner Williams' question, on page 6, the definition of junk or salvage yard, it mentions rubber tires, which I thought we were trying to take out altogether as any type of a item that might be stored.
So to be able to do that, we have to define it. So for us to say in a certain zoning area, we do not want to have a junk or salvage yard. Being able to define what is junk becomes a very important part of that. And keep in mind too, we also do have the used tire ordinance as well that goes along with this.
So what this is saying is these are considered junk and salvage that is not permitted.
If you chose to make it unpermitted, correct. So if you could say, when we get into the next phase, that a junk or salvage yard is not allowed in any zoning district within the city. Or you could say it is only allowed in basic industrial.
Yeah, okay.
So, or general industrial, or requires a conditional use in one of those areas. But to be able to do that, we've got to have these definitions in place.
Okay.
I thought that we had already talked about, junk and salvage in the city limits, that really wasn't any place in the city limits that we would allow that type of activity.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, as we're looking at this is still using our existing ordinance as our base document. So where you see things in black, that's basically what was already in existence within our ordinance. The red highlight changes so that you can see how we've tried to beef that up in this case. As we deal with junk and litter and that issue within the city, we find that we need to have a more robust definition of what constitutes those things to be able to say no, basically, or yes in some cases.
On page 10, where you have a nice little chart under residential districts, where it says R9 and R6. Can you go ahead and put what the minimum lot square footage would be in each of those districts, at least for R9 and R6? Because that's the only difference between those two, correct? Is a lot,
No, that's not the only difference between those two.
okay,
That is the primary difference. They do have different setback requirements.
okay. Do you think it
Russ,
would,
he's muted. He's trying to speak.
would it be helpful to at least put what the minimum lot size is? Because I get asked that question a lot.
Again, all the setback details, minimum lot sizes, height restrictions, all of that will be in the use areas that follow this. So
Right,
in our current section, this is basically kind of a this is almost another
kind
title
of a hit
page.
list of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically a summary page of what are our zoning districts. So
Right.
what would follow within the ordinance after these pages would be the setbacks, each one of these districts would have their own then section that defines what their setbacks are, what their minimum lot sizes are, what the minimum lot widths, height restrictions, uses. So what are the allowed uses within that zoning district? What
Are there
the
any existing mobile home
additional
districts?
uses within that zone? Yes. The mobile home park that's on US 17 is still zoned mobile home.
I thought, John, we didn't have any mobile homes in the city at all. Or is it just on that district?
we do.
Just that is the only zoned district for mobile homes.
You've
So
got
that is
something on Goodyear Avenue that looks like a,
unfortunately, that meets all the definitions in the code as a modular home.
I understand they're on Wolf
Do we
Street
need to
too.
change that then?
Excuse me, Mayor.
Do we need to change that? I noticed your definition for a dwelling mobile home.
That's
I see that.
one of the reasons we change. That's one of the reasons we're changing. We're trying to catch up where everybody else is ahead of us.
Okay.
But essentially for lack of a better way to describe them, the pre-built sheds that have been that are being converted into houses.
Mhm.
There's a hole in our existing codes and our ordinances that we're trying to address so that we can stop that type of construction.
John, I've been told that they're on Wolf Street also, and I don't know that we've got, the one on Goodyear is not the only one.
No, you're correct. It is not the only one. And it is something that we made the developer of all of those units go through a very long permitting process in order to do that. We looked for every possible angle within our ordinances and within the building code to not allow those. And he met every hurdle.
So that's on a pad, the one on Goodyear?
The one on Goodyear is, most of them are on, they're on piers. There are some of them that are put onto slabs.
I need to know the connotation of a pier. Is that in these definitions?
No, sir, that's in the building code.
All right. We need to take a look at those. We really do. That was one of the ones that I highlighted here is that thing, and I've had it on my mind long before I ever saw this, and I just haven't brought it to light.
And-
That's Urbana Park is a gym, and it needs to be held to gym standards. It really does. And whatever we do.
And you know, and unfortunately there are, you know, as I said a few minutes ago, we're always behind trying to keep up with what the new trend or the new loophole or the new way around to try to do something as inexpensively as possible. Yeah, and that's something that's why we're going through this process now.
Does this entail the fabricated parts of the
Talking
building?
about prefab homes.
Yes.
So that does give us that is something that we did add in, is the definition of a all we had originally was a definition of a mobile home. So we have changed the definition of a mobile home. We've also added the definition of modular, and there is a difference. And modular and manufactured. Trying to keep up with this movement. Part of it is related to the tiny house movement.
Right.
Part of it is related to the just overall cost of construction. People are looking for ways to create housing as inexpensively as possible, and that's simply it's simply a fact of where we are right now.
Well, I agree with that, but I agree that there has got to be recognition in our planning and our ordinances that an established neighborhood has got to carry precedence over what's happening. You know, what the needs are. Like my old house over in Urbana Park was built in 1870. You know, it deserves better than what we're allowing to go on. We've got over there also, we've got a warehouse over there. That never should have happened. Never. And that needs to be looked at while we're doing this too. And I realize this is phase 2, but this is a time to start pointing out some of the things, the inequities that we really need to address with this, what we're doing.
And John, I want to talk about the section 23-319 off-street parking requirements.
Parking requirements. That's good. That's a good.
Give us
been a fun one
a
for us.
page number. Give us
Page
a page.
21. Page 21.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess mine really is kind of somewhat in line with this, but mine is because of a concern along Martin Luther King. And there's the area right at L Street.
Yep.
Just on the other side of L Street. And they've turned that into a garage.
It sure
Just
has.
don't have a building. I mean, if we might as well go and put a shed over
And I would
that
love,
area, because there's nothing but mechanic. They don't do nothing but work on cars.
What was the location, Commissioner?
L Street.
L
just
Street
off
and
of L Street.
MLK, right
Brian,
there.
you're familiar with this one. We've had it in court multiple times.
I
On
thought
the north side of L Street, right there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's right between L and M Street there.
Yes, I'm so tired of seeing 7 to 8 cars parked along there, and nothing but oil spills and all that kind of stuff. And the people that live in that area they can barely even get there to park.
And that is an issue that we have had. That specific issue at that location is one we've had in court multiple times.
Yeah, and they also park a lot of commercial vehicles along there as well.
So evidently, we're not doing anything. We have in court, but it's not a deterrent, seems to be.
And unfortunately, sometimes it's not. We can only issue citations and take them to court and try to get the best results out of it that we can for the surrounding neighborhood. That doesn't prevent somebody from doing it again.
Yeah, but they have messed up our road. We paved that road, and it's terrible. I mean, it's all over the place. And I thought we had an ordinance that said no outdoor working on cars. I think basically.
We do. We've cited them for that violation and brought them to court. I'll take a look at, and maybe after this, I'll talk to John and get back with an update on the status of that case.
do we have a progressive fine ordinance? I mean, progressive, if we're gonna keep fining them $10, they could pay $10.
Yep. And I'm telling you, it hadn't deterred them because I was on my way to church Sunday and they were lined up out there Sunday.
Yes.
Do we need to
Does-
confer
does-
with the judge on
well,
this?
Well,
Can we involve EPA, EPD, the Environmental Protection Agency on any of this stuff? Because if it's something that's happening, you know, that's gonna be a hazard to the environment, maybe we can get them involved.
I'll be sure to look into it and try to get an update to the full commission so we don't derail, you know, the work session. But we'll get back on it and I'll talk to John about it and get you guys an update.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And just kind of seeing that ticket there, just to kind of see if that's being addressed in this session, in this ordinance update as well.
We're looking at parking all over, aren't we, John, Russ? I think that's a big part of this thing.
Yes, sir. And there, as we've talked about, actually, Russ and I were talking more about it this morning. There's two distinct parking issues that we have to look at. One is future development. So what are our requirements for people moving forward who are building new? But also, how do we deal with parking in general within the city? As we know, you know, I'd love to be able to require every house in Brunswick to have 2 paved parking spaces, not in the front yard to the side of the house, or you know, not smack middle in front of, you know, adjacent to the road. But there are a lot of properties in Brunswick that have no rear access, no side yards, and may only have a 10-foot front yard before they hit the street right of way. And the actual paved portion of the street is not large enough to accommodate on-street parking. We run into this a lot in the South End in particular. And if you got a 2 or 3 bedroom house, all of a sudden you've got 2, 3, maybe 4 cars. If you got 2 teenage kids living in this house, taking up the entire yard or the front yard and parking. And that's a separate issue than something like a bus or 5 boats and 10 ski-doos.
Or a fifth wheeler.
Or a fifth wheeler or any of those things. It's just the simple act of parking in some cases. Then what type of allowances are we going to have or not have for people to have recreational vehicles and things like that? So it's a multi-layered issue. That some of that is addressed here, but it is something that we have spent we spent a lot of time even at our last planning commission last week talking about, and it may be one that continues to need more work as we go forward.
Commissioners, and Ms. Hunter, Ms. Moran, we thank you. We coming to the end of our work session, realizing that we only just touched the surface of what we need to talk about here. So we need to have to schedule another work session to continue on, because I know there's other questions that need to be answered. And also, I think too, if we want to have a 2-on-2 where we can have as much time as possible, maybe that's, or either let's make sure that we have our next meeting, have another work session so we can dwell into this, or either send our questions to John, or however way you guys want to do it. Just let me know. But we'll be here all night.
Yeah.
This.
No, trust me, we recognize that. We've had some marathon meetings over the last couple of months at the Planning Commission.
Hey, I've got one thing I want to say before we sign off on this thing on page 20 real quick.
Okay, Jay.
It looks to me like there's an error in who they're to make an appeal to on D. It says the city clerk, and I would much prefer that to say the city manager.
Yes, probably.
And that's the only thing. There's no discussion. I believe most people will agree with that. I don't know why anybody would need to make an appeal to the city clerk. instead
It
of
would
the
fi-
committee.
Well, the clerk would be the holder of the records. They would file their notice of appeal with the city clerk.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Noted.
sorry. Maybe that should be clarified, but in
Alright.
any case you appeal, you'd file a notice with the clerk and then,
That's acceptable without a doubt. I went straight to appeal trying to get through all this stuff, so I'm okay. If everybody else is okay, I'm okay.
Okay, Commissioner, you, is all right if we get out of our work session and go into our regular meeting, and we will come back, have our city clerk to reschedule our work session for our next meeting, so we continue, and while she's rescheduling, while we have our, have this document, we can go through it and outline our questions and try to get through it again. And we may have to do another work session after that, but we are going to take our time and go through this so we can make sure that it's a good document, because for our citizens and people who want to live in the city.
Hey, we
Can we-
appreciate everybody's input here too, and all the hard work that's going on.
Definitely. Good
Certainly.
start. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, that was big work. Can we also have the option of
That's okay. I'll let everybody.
one-on-one or two-on-one?
Yes, Julie, you can.
Okay.
That's great too. We can schedule that. John, make sure you can schedule that with anyone who wants to do one-on-one or two-on-two, exactly like that.
Okay.
So we can make sure that we can really get through this document and find out all the things that we need to do moving forward.
Thank
Sir.
you. It's a
Mr. Mayor, if
boatload
you
of
need a
work.
motion, I'd like to offer a motion that we adjourn the work session.
All right,
Second.
motion second for the adjourned work session. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Let's see, the ayes have it. Okay, we stand adjourned for our work session. And we will move immediately into our regular scheduled meeting. I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting dated Wednesday, March 17th. We are a virtual teleconference via Zoom. We have our invocation. Commissioner Williams, will you do our invocation, and I will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we come now in the name of your Son, Jesus. Father, we thank you for this another day. God, we thank you for the blessed opportunity to live in this great city of Brunswick, Georgia. And God, as we come now to do the business of this city, we ask that you would guide us and direct us. Father God, that we will make decisions that are sound, God, that we realize that everybody may not agree, but God, we realize that if we make sound decisions, it'll be the best for all of us. So God, we ask that you would just guide us and direct us, lead us and protect us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. As we move with our agenda, before I ask for, before I continue, is there anything we need to add or delete from our agenda? Here and now. Okay, we will move directly into our meeting. Our first item is a public comment. Item number 1, Planning and Appeals Commission Chairman Dave Bowers to address the commission regarding revision to the zoning ordinance. Are you going to talk about that, Dave, or we just still going to just wait for our next meeting?
Again, I'd just like to say this is my first Zoom meeting. I'm usually uptown, and I thank you all for the last hour. I originally scheduled meeting with you all because I didn't know that we were having a work session today. So as you can see, there's a lot of detail. We're being proactive by putting things in there that may not come about. And again, it's just in order to try and get ahead. And, you know, as John said, we're 40 years behind, if not more. So, you know, we have more work to do with you all on this first phase. The second phase is going to require citizens groups like the NPAs. We may need to get some developers involved. We may need to get some existing businesses involved. But I think it's all for the good of where the city is now and where it's headed. And so I just thank you all for your time, and we'll be talking a lot more down the road.
Dave,
Thank
we
you,
thank you
Dave.
for your time.
Thank you.
Your efforts and what you're doing, you and your
Thank you,
team,
Dave.
matter of fact.
Sure enough.
Ms.
Thank you
Harrison,
so much.
thank you all for doing this. and knowing that we are going to do a comprehensive delve into our ordinance, and with y'all leadership, we really gonna turn out something that's really, really good. So really thank you so much.
Very good.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank each of you.
All right. Item number 2 for presentation, Greg Roche, Senior Principal for Geotech. I think it's Geosyntac, to give briefing regarding the corrective action plan for Hercules and Pine Nova. Sir, are you on board?
Kyle, Mark raised his hand. Could you add him to the panel? Mark Johnson.
Certainly.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
Does Kyle have to add him? Because he's
added.
He's there.
Hey, thank y'all for letting me in. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all, and enjoyed listening to all the issues y'all are wrestling with. I understand that Greg Roush is not able to get on, but his colleague, who I think is on, is named Dwayne Graves. So maybe while they're wrestling, and I'm watching my text messages to see if they get on, but I'll briefly tell you while they're wrestling with the technology. And again, thank y'all for letting us participate this evening. What we wanted to give you an update on is a really comprehensive plan that Hercules and Pine Nova have been working on, at the Pine Nova plant site to improve environmental conditions there at the plant, which of course will, contribute to, a better environment for our community. We've been going around the past couple of days, and we met with the county commissioners yesterday. We met with the Chamber of Commerce Board this morning, and meeting with you this evening. Of course, we welcome the opportunity to meet with other groups. And, and the reason we're doing this, frankly, is because, a lot of these issues are very complicated. I would acknowledge in the past, maybe at times we have not done as good a job as we could have to bring the public up to speed, to bring the city up to speed. And we're working to try to improve that. So that's why we're doing these presentations. I'll add that, Pine Nova, Hercules is doing the work, but Pine Nova has been a real key partner in this. Patty Downs and Molly Matthews, I believe, are listening in this evening. They're both from Pine Nova, and and Patty shared with me earlier this week, just as an illustration of how important the Pine Nova plan has been to this community for years and years. That they now have people who are actually fourth generation employees. So it's just been part of the fabric of this community for a long time. I think they're currently employing over 250 people, over 300 if you count the Rincon plant. So we're glad to be a part of the process that we firmly believe is going to ensure the viability of that plant going forward in terms of environmental compliance and being good neighbors in the community. The really good news about this plan, and it's been submitted to EPD. The public comment period is currently ongoing until May 10th. We'll have another virtual public meeting on March 31st, and we can provide the link to that if you don't already have it. So it's a good news story. They're actually, we've done work for years, and they're out there doing work right now. And as I mentioned earlier, Greg Roush is having trouble. I think Dwayne Graves, and Dwayne and Greg are both with Geosyntac. These guys are serious scientists, engineers. Geosyntac's a very large firm with about 1,500 engineers and scientists. both Dwayne and Greg have been with Geosyntec for over 30 years each. And, they understand the science. We do have a presentation. I think Greg probably has the presentation on his computer. I don't know if Dwayne does. I understand Dwayne is a spectator, and I don't know if there's a way to bring him on, but maybe if y'all could try that, maybe that'll
Looks like
work.
he just appeared.
Yes, we're adding him now.
Great.
Okay.
And let me add, while I'm thinking about it, for all y'all, that the staff has just been fantastic to work with on this process to pull together this presentation tonight and provide all the links and stuff like that. So, my hat's off to them for all the great work, and they've just been so responsive and helpful. So I'm not sure.
All right, so Mark,
There we go.
Get in, and Greg and I are here together, so we can proceed. And I have the presentation on my laptop, so we can, I hope I can share that.
Well, I will mute and be listening in, and then afterwards we'll certainly be willing to entertain any questions from the commission. So I'm glad y'all got on. Great.
Yeah, me too. That was a little tense there for a minute. Let me see if I can share screens, and we'll be right with you. All right, let's see. Slideshow. Where's that slideshow? Right there. Okay, can you still hear me? Can you see our screen?
We can hear you, but not see your screen.
You can't see the
We
screen.
hear you, but can't see the screen.
Okay, well, that's part of the job done. Let me try something else here because it's up on my end. And let's see. Let me come back to Zoom.
I believe you are sharing your screen now.
I am. Really? Okay.
Well, you are.
That's a surprise to me. So we'll try this again. Share screen.
Yeah, I shouldn't have bragged on what great engineers and scientists.
Yeah, right. Well, what you have to do is look at the fact that both Greg and I have gray hair. So, this is a stretch for us sometimes, this modern technology. So let's.
It's shared now.
Now how are we doing? Okay, maybe we just got a lag. We're working from a hotel here, and the Wi-Fi might be a little slow. So with this, I'm going to let Greg speak, and he'll drive, and I'll pop in a minute too.
Okay. I guess I'm Greg Roush. This is Dwayne Graves. As Mark said, we're both with Geosyntec Consultants, and we're helping Hercules implement corrective actions at the Brunswick plant site. Today, we're going to present just a high-level overview of the key elements of the corrective action plan that was submitted to EPD earlier this year. It's 120 pages long, so I've got it condensed down to about 12 or 15 slides here. So I'm trying to convey the high points. Will be available at the end for questions. As you know, Hercules has done a lot of work at the site over the years. Obviously, there is still more to do. And so the corrective action plan describes how Hercules intends to address remaining soil contamination and groundwater contamination at the site. We'll also discuss next steps, which will get into the timelines of the corrective action, and then how to provide comments on the corrective action plan itself. So that's pretty much the outline we'll go through. Let's see, can you guys see my cursor moving? Just a couple of primers here before we get into it. If you recall, there's one facility, but there are two property owners. In 2010, Hercules sold the operating portion of the plant to Pinova Solutions, which is outlined with the purple boundary here. Hercules retained ownership of the northern portions and the eastern portions as well. Just kind of while we're on this slide, this area is the area of some former wastewater treatment ponds. And then just to the northwest of that area is an area where Hercules received a Wildlife Habitat Council certification for planting wildflowers to promote butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. And then they also are maintaining this loblolly pine forest. Moving on.
Where is Ashland Oil with the ownership of this property?
Hercules is a wholly owned company of Ashland Chemical, Ashland LLC.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity or not. I was going to just get into a little bit of the history here. There's obviously more history on this website, herculesbrunswick.com. I encourage you guys to take a look at it. It's being updated routinely. The corrective action plan itself is on that website. It gives some detailed history of the plant and the site investigations and corrective actions. But just to talk about a few things here, the plant's been there since the 1920s. They use pine stumps as their main feedstock to produce products that are used around the world. It was also, the plant was also critical supplying materials to the US government during World War II. So the plant's been there a long time. It operated for 50 or 60 years before modern day environmental regulations. Plant operating practices weren't the same in those days as they are now. They weren't as environmentally conscious. And so over time, chemicals have seeped into the soil and groundwater. And a lot of work has been done to assess and evaluate where those chemicals are. There's also been a lot of corrective action work that's been done over the years, and just not to name them all, I would refer you to the website. But just to name a few, in the 1980s, these surface impoundments were closed by excavating the sediment and soil below that sediment all the way down to the groundwater surface. In the 1990s, a groundwater remediation system was installed down gradient of the surface impoundments to address shallow groundwater. That system ran from 1995 to about 2009. And then in the 2010 timeframe, this pink hatched area kind of here in the middle, Hercules excavated around 50,000 tons of contaminated soil and shipped it off site for disposal. They also excavated the sediments in the in-street ditch, which is, if I can get my cursor to work here, kind of this long linear structure here. They excavated sediment out of that in-street ditch and then concrete lined it. So as you guys are aware, EPD renewed the hazardous waste permit in November of 2020. The permit has requirements to maintain monitoring wells, how to take care of the closed surface impoundments, as well as requirements for site-wide corrective action. The permit is important because like I said, it sets the roadmap, for everything going forward at the plant site. So the corrective action plan was prepared to address chemicals present in soils and groundwater from historic manufacturing operations, and it was submitted to be in compliance with this site-wide corrective action requirement that was in the permit. The CAP itself uses scientific methods to make decisions about corrective actions, and it's being performed with under the guidance and oversight of EPD. The corrective action plan itself describes where the contamination is, what the ongoing corrective actions are, other available tools to help address these historic releases. It also discusses additional investigations and actions to inform future corrective actions, and it presents an adaptive approach to the implementation of that. And I'll corrective action. So I'll talk about a little bit more about that on the next slide. So the graphic on the right, I know is maybe a little bit busy, and I don't expect you guys to go through it all on the call here today or the Zoom meeting, but it outlines what the adaptive approach is. If you look to your left here, quite simply, it's going to be an iterative process. So we're going to implement corrective actions now, and we'll discuss those later. We're going to monitor and then optimize those corrective actions. And then while we're doing that, we're going to continue investigations. And if we identify other areas that need or require corrective action, we'll move directly into corrective actions for those. So it's going to be just an iterative process. Hopefully it'll be fluid and we can move from, one step to the next. I think it's, for a site like this, I think it's a good approach. It's based on science. It's focused on results, and we're making adjustments as we go. And I guess maybe an analogy for something like that might be, changing your game plan at halftime in a football game, right? You've got a game plan in the first half. Maybe things aren't going quite right. You make a few tweaks at halftime. Things turn out better for you in the second half. And so that's kind of the whole concept of this optimization of the systems that we're going to install. Does everybody kind of understand that iterative, adaptive concept?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I have one question. As we've had a lot of odor issues within the city lately, and most of what you're looking at is soil related. So I didn't know how much you had your nose buried in the sand versus your nose as to what's being released.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that a Pinova issue? That's an
We don't know. We don't know as a community. There's been across the board a lot of complaints and issues with acrid smells, in particular at night. But sometimes, they're still there in the morning. I think, some people are obviously more sensitive than others, but it's causing quite a reaction with some people.
Well, we did get some information from William Kitt with the MPA for over in that area regarding a smell coming from Pinova that smelled like burnt tires or something. He did send us an email on that.
In general, it seems to be a very acrid smell that literally wakes people up at night smelling this. We have not been able to discern where it's coming from. So
yeah, Commissioner Martin, I'll follow up with Pinova about that, but I mean, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any unusual odors from the Pinova plant, and I haven't heard of any odors as a result of the ongoing corrective work that's going on. But I mean, it's certainly, I live here, so I'm aware of the issue, and I'll make sure that everybody on our team is, I don't want to say keeping their eyes open for it. I guess in this case, keeping their noses open for it. So, but I'll follow up on that and let you know what I learned.
William was in attendance at one time because he's on the planning commission. So he did send an email to the commission regarding smells that were coming from Pinova.
Yeah.
And most of the citizens have been asked to, when they smell something, to record where they live and what they smelled, so that I don't know who it is that's mapping it, if it's EPA. I don't know if any of the other commissioners know, but somebody's
EPD.
mapping, EPD
Yeah.
is mapping where and when that occurs to try to pinpoint something.
Well, I'll certainly follow up on that, and we'll let you know what I learned.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea if something different is being released at different times or, whatever the nature might be from some of our different industries.
Right. I don't think it's anything to do with the historic contamination at the site. Mark can follow up with Pinova and see if they know anything about it.
There's also a gas that some folks are saying is burning their eyes along with the odor.
And this has all been fairly recent, I would say probably within the last 3 or 4 months that we've had these focused complaints.
Okay. We have a lot planned for this year, but we don't actually have a shovel in the ground per se. So I don't think it's anything to do with, what Hercules is doing out there to address the the contamination. So we'll certainly tell our field personnel to take note of any odors that they smell. Kind of moving along, we'll get into some of the different corrective actions, and we'll start with soils first and then move to groundwater. There's 2 different sets of corrective actions being implemented for soils. One addresses site-wide soils and one addresses soils in the former Toxaphene tank farm. So this is a map of the facility again. Over 4,000 soil samples have been collected and shipped to the laboratory for analysis. So each one of these dots on the map, represent a soil sampling location. So there's lots of data.
Over what period of time?
I think some of these go back to 1995.
So they're checked randomly, or that's over that length of time period?
That's over that length of time period.
So how long has your company been involved?
We got involved about midway through 2019. But got seriously involved at the beginning of January of 2020.
Thank you.
Yep. So I mentioned before, there's been a lot of soil remediation that's done at the site, pretty significant remediation. And out of those 4,000 samples, there's 34 remaining locations that are the subject of corrective actions that are discussed in the corrective action plan. That's these green dots that are on this figure. And you can see most of them are clustered in the main production area of the plant. This blue area right here is the former Toxaphene tank farm. And we'll talk about that on the next slide. So this is a close-up of the former Toxaphene tank farm. It's roughly 70 feet by 140 feet. It does contain the highest concentrations of toxaphene remaining at the site in the soils. The remedy selected for this area is called in situ solidification, or ISS. It's a process where you mix cement in with the soil down the depths of 5 feet or so, and it creates a solidified mass of it's going to look like a solidified monolith. It'll be like a sidewalk or a driveway or a concrete driveway or something. It's not quite that hard, but it'll be a concrete monolith. It will provide a usable buildable space while binding the contaminants in that monolith so that they don't move anywhere and they don't pose any additional risk. It's a pretty commonly used technology. It's been implemented in Georgia at a number of sites. It's used across the country as well. And Geosyntec's been involved in 10 or 12 of these ourselves. So it's a good technology. EPD approved this plan late last fall, and we went through, contractor procurement process, and a contractor's been selected. And we plan to, start that work in mid-April timeframe.
So the toxaphene, is it drawn to the cement, or is there the potential for it to leach deeper into the soil and then migrate out?
No, I mean, that's kind of the whole intent of binding it up into this monolith. It doesn't leach. And that's part of the performance criteria that EPD requires to implement one of these remedies. So it has to have a certain really low hydraulic conductivity. The numbers like 1 × 10⁻⁷ centimeters per second. And I know that might not mean anything to you guys, but that's basically an impermeable unit. So water does not flow through it, and therefore nothing can leach out of it.
No, I mean the toxaphene that's not encapsulated in the cement, if it's still at a depth that's deeper than the cement that's formed, will that toxaphene continue to go deep and then leach out?
Toxaphene is not really all that soluble in groundwater to begin with. And then the little bit that might solubilize in the groundwater, just because of the chemical properties of toxaphene itself, it has a high KOC value, so it just does not migrate in groundwater very far or at all. Correct. I'm sitting with a microbiologist here, so yeah, so that's not a concern.
Yeah.
So
So the other value of the in-situ solidification is the water will shed. You should think of it as a giant concrete block. The water is going to shed off the top, so it's not going to percolate through what's underneath that solidified area. It really won't receive any surface water, so there's not any impetus to push anything that could dissolve down any further, because water won't go through it and water can't get under it because it's all shed off to the surface.
Thank you.
There are another area that's in the same tank farm that we intend to excavate, and these are shallow soils, 2 to 4 feet. It's this blue shaded area down here to the south of the former toxaphene tank farm. We do plan to excavate that area and consolidate it in the toxaphene tank farm for the ISS treatment. So we'll move on to groundwater, and I guess before we get into the corrective actions that we're implementing, just a little bit of background, on the aquifer systems, and you guys are probably aware of this. The site in the Brunswick Peninsula is underlain by 3 different aquifer systems that are all separated from each other by clay confining units. There's the superficial aquifer system that's underlain by the Brunswick aquifer system, and then that's underlain by the Floridan aquifer system. The superficial aquifer system then is divided into an upper superficial aquifer and a lower superficial aquifer. And so the contamination that we're addressing is in this upper superficial aquifer. And that upper superficial aquifer is divided into a shallow, intermediate, and deep zone. So again, this whole unit, the upper superficial aquifer is about 100 feet thick. So that gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. In the center part of the plant site, there's a downward gradient. So groundwater is moving downward, and that pushes contamination from the shallow zone down to the deep zone. And it's in the deep zone where the contamination then migrates laterally. So if you were looking at a plan view map, most of the contamination is in the deep zone. And if you're looking at the plan, you know, that's the biggest footprint of the groundwater plume is in the deep zone. With that, I will turn it over to Dwayne. We've got 3 different groundwater remedial technologies that we're using, and I'll pass it over to him.
All right, so thanks, Greg. And we've looked at a number of technologies and selected 2 general types of approaches. One for shallow groundwater, one for deep groundwater, and a lot of the decision making there has to do with what we can physically deliver. The hardest part about dealing with groundwater is getting the technology to the water. Trying to get the water out of the ground to the technology has its own set of problems, and it's almost impossible to do that. So we really favor in place or in situ treatment technologies any place we can effectively do that. And it looks like we have a good chance to do that here. And that's what we're planning to do. For the shallow aquifer, we're planning to use a technology called in situ chemical oxidation. Can you go ahead? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And this is the location for that. This is a shallow water treatment, simply because we have good access. We can apply chemical oxidants, which are very strong oxidizing chemicals. They will react with the target contaminants here and oxidize them or chemically destroy them. Very similar to burning, really, and destroy the chemicals using these oxidants. It's a contact sport, so the 2 chemicals have to actually touch one another. When that happens, the chemical oxidation process happens. It's a pretty fast reaction. We may have to make multiple applications of the oxidant to get everything, because the oxidants will react with organic matter in the soil and other parts of the soil, some of the minerals in the soil like iron especially, but it also reacts with the chemicals. So we think that's going to be a very effective technology for this focused area to really hit it hard and achieve an effective remediation for this shallow area.
Right. I would add this treatment area is actually kind of surrounded by plant utilities. So, you know, the implementation of this, we're going to kind of start on the inside of that treatment area and then move outward. And as you can see on this, you know, the blue circles on here represent like what an injection well location would be. And then it represents the radius of influence that oxidant travels into the formation and then destroys the contaminants. So we're going to start kind of in the middle and then move out toward the edge with the main, you know, criteria is, you know, protecting the plant infrastructure and utilities.
How many feet do you go down?
We're going to be in the upper 20 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. As we think about deeper groundwater, and now we're in that deep upper superficial, that's in the 90 to 100 foot depth range. We've selected bioremediation as the appropriate remedy for this water. And bioremediation simply uses naturally occurring bacteria to degrade and permanently destroy contaminants in the groundwater. The job that we have to do is to make the subsurface into an environment where the bacteria can be active. And that's the engineering part of this remedy. We will be installing rows of wells. We'll be injecting some amendments, in some cases very simple, not much more than air. In other cases, something a little more complicated, but some food grade additives that basically provide something for the bacteria to eat as they breathe the contaminants and degrade them. So let me show you what kind of schematically what this is going to look like. So this is sort of how the process works. The technology is called a permeable reactive barrier, sometimes also called a biowall. And what we're going to do is set up a reactive area as indicated by the green block on this little cartoon. And we're going to, in one case, inject air to generate aerobic conditions for the biodegradation of benzene and chlorobenzene. They degrade in the presence of oxygen. In another part of the site, our primary groundwater contaminant is actually chloroform. It won't degrade in the presence of air. Anaerobic bacteria are what's required there. So we will manipulate the subsurface to make it oxygen free, and we'll actually add some bacteria that have been specifically selected from other sites that can degrade chloroform. We'll actually breathe the chloroform and degrade it, and we'll provide some food for those bacteria to make a wall. And what happens is, as the contaminated groundwater strikes and enters this permeable reactive area, the bacteria see this, they see it as food or something they can breathe. In the case of chloroform, they biodegrade this, and what passes through is clean water, and the contaminants are degraded. This has been widely used in a lot of places across the United States, and I personally have put this in several times, this kind of technology in, and it tends to be a very efficient and effective way to deal with groundwater. This is one location, if you're familiar with the property known as Terry's Creek. This is more or less, depending on our adaptive technology, adaptive approach, where one of the reactive barriers is. This will be the oxygen bearing one or the aerobic one. And right now, if you happen to drive down Highway 17 this week, you will have seen some a drill rig out there and some people scurrying around. We're actually putting in the first of this process, and we're going to be doing some initial testing to understand what our zone of influence is for the injected air, so we know how to space additional wells as we're building this barrier, as generally represented by the yellow dots here. The next slide shows the same concept. It's actually on the other side of Highway 17. This is a little further south. And this is where we'll be doing the anaerobic or oxygen-free part, because chloroform is the primary contaminant here. But the same concept holds. We'll put this in, we'll provide the appropriate amendments, and then do monitoring to confirm that both process is working, as well as additional delineation here to make sure that we're capturing the groundwater plume as it's migrating to the east. And with that, Greg's going to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, so the ongoing corrective actions that we just went through, we're initiating those and plan to complete those in 2021. Next year, once these systems get installed, we'll perform performance monitoring and make adjustments to make sure these systems are working. Kind of concurrently with that, we'll do some additional investigations to identify potentially other areas that might require remediation. And then in 2023 and beyond, we'll implement those additional corrective actions based on the results of the ongoing corrective actions and the additional investigations that we plan to implement. So the corrective action plan is out for public comment. It runs from February 8th to May 10th. There is a virtual public meeting on March 31st. That information is posted on that website that I mentioned earlier, herculesbrunswick.com. Following this public comment period, the cap will be revised as necessary, and EPD will issue the corrective action plan for a second public notice period before it's incorporated into the facilities permit. Comments and questions on the corrective action plan can be submitted to Jim Slawinski at EPD. Here's his email address, but as I said, it's the public notice is also on the website. So that information is on there as well.
I want to thank you guys for any comments, questions for them, Commissioner, before we move forward.
I just want to ask them a question.
Yes, sir.
Are y'all aware that there was a well and a storage tank over on I Street, just a little southwest of Panova, that dried up, and the city and the joint water sewer had to abandon that well? Have y'all discussed that at any point?
That's news to me, but
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
You know, I just wish you'd just talk to the folks over there about it. I really do.
Yeah, what's the name of
yeah, I took some notes on that. So it's a well that was in a storage tank near on I Street. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, we'll follow up on that and see what we can learn.
It was contaminated with salt, and so they had to close it down. And the point is that plant used more water over there at one time than the city of Atlanta used in a year. They used that much water in one day over there in the old days. And here the city goes over there, which it now belongs to the joint water sewer, drills a well and puts in a storage tank, and it's just sitting there.
We'll certainly follow up on that.
That'd be great. That'd be super.
And we'll let you know what we find out.
Yeah, I appreciate your presentation here too. I really do.
Mayor, I have a question. Just in terms of the iterative monitoring and changes, what are the requirements for you all to communicate any changes in that in the future?
So all of these are in the corrective action plan, and we are currently writing more detailed plans to submit the EPD. And the communication chain will be included in those more detailed plans. Typically, it's probably on a quarterly basis or semi-annual basis. We're talking to EPD fairly regularly about the activities going on at the plant site. So frequency might be a little more upfront, and then as things stabilize, that frequency gets spread out once things get stabilized.
What's your percentage of success in this remediation process?
Oh, that's a good question. It's trying to think of a failure that we've had, and I'm having a hard time pulling up one. I mean, because we do take a lot of pains on the front end to understand how these processes are going to work, and every site's different. Every site brings its own peculiarities and nuances. So if you do your homework up front, the probability of success is really quite high. Now, I have seen colossal failures. Fortunately, I haven't been involved in any of those, but if you don't dot the I's and cross the T's up front, and we're trying to do that, especially the iterative process helps us with that. I'm expecting, a 90-95% probability of success here, if not better. Me personally, I expect it to be a home run. Is because what we've seen so far is lining up very nicely. We've demonstrated very good benzene and chlorobenzene biodegradation in lab studies where we don't try to candy coat the process so that it's really favorable. We try to break it in the lab, and worked. Same thing with the chloroform, worked extremely well, in fact. The risk for this is really in the engineering step of getting the technology in the ground, and that's what we're working on right now with this first installation that we're doing to understand how effectively we're going to be able to aerate and get material injected in the right place. But that's honestly the real risk. The technology will work. It's getting it in the ground in the right places, and that's where the risk lies. But we've done a lot of this, and I'm pretty confident we'll be able to pull that off.
And what is the start and finish date?
Start date is kind of for the northern barrier is kind of now. We're doing the pilot testing to understand, radius of influence, how far the away from injection points our treatment will go, so we know how to space things. Endpoint is hard to tell. Again, it is a biological system. Bacteria can't tell time very well. So it's hard to predict what that end time is. We've seen things go, as quickly as 2 or 3 years, and others take, 5 to 10 years And a lot of it has to do, in this case especially, this will be a long-term protective measure because we're waiting for groundwater to migrate through the barrier. So it'll be a long-lived and long-maintained reactive barrier to continue to provide protection of the down gradient water.
Thank you.
So Mark, what is the length of time between this corrective action and the next permitting corrective action?
Thank you. I was going to ask that.
I think the permits are, I can't remember if they're 5-year or 10-year permits.
Okay.
10-year permits.
That's
10
what I
year,
thought, 10 years, okay. So I really liked Mayor Pro Tem's question of, how do you measure success? And once you launch into this, how do you know if it's working, it's not working? Do you have to come back out and say, okay, we need to change our corrective measures because it's not effective in this particular manner? What are the checks and balances?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, there'll be extensive monitoring to address performance, but Dwayne, why don't you and Greg?
Yeah, no, that's the right answer, Mark. With these things installed, we'll be putting monitoring wells, immediately up gradient, immediately down gradient, a little further down gradient, so we can watch and understand what's happening in our reactive barrier. And we should see that really pretty quickly, and that's all driven by how fast it takes the groundwater to get from the treatment zone, to our nearest down gradient receptor well where we can measure it. And of course, groundwater doesn't move, terribly fast, but you see that over the course of a few months in many cases.
But what's the long-term follow-up and commitment for this after this process has played itself out? Well, and I asked that question because I think about what's happened over in the channel with the ship. And so, I mean, even with them doing the due diligence or what have you, we still have yet to see the end result of this over an extended period of time. So we are at this point with this process because this has been over varying decades. And so after this process has played itself through, what is the long-term commitment for follow-up after this? What's the after this follow-up?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's dependent, I mean, we think this is going to be a very successful corrective action plan. And obviously, as we just discussed, the permit itself is for 10 years. So, so for at least 10 years, we're going to be out there monitoring and checking, and it's, to answer your question, it sort of depends on the success of this corrective action plan. But I mean, the commitment there right now is to get this right and, to leave the community in a better place environmentally, in a far better place. So
let me ask this question. You mentioned something that I was going to mention about the community. I noticed that most of everything that you're doing as far as corrective actions are being done inside Pinova's footprint. But there are a lot of areas in communities around Pinova that have been contaminated and have had issues. Is there going to be anything done about those areas? Will there be any remediation for those areas?
I'm not familiar with any plans right now to do off-site remediation that I'm aware of, Commissioner. But certainly, part of what we're really trying to do is with these presentations, and we're going to continue to do them, is answer questions that the public has, because we want people to understand this and feel, and I believe they should be, to feel safe in this community. I mean, I live here and I love it. And, I want other people to understand this is a safe community and this is going to make it safer.
Now, I'm looking at a comment that we've got, and it says, what about the water that is already east of Highway 17 and migrating towards the Terry Creek Mobile Home Park? How would that water be treated?
Yeah, Terry Creek is a separate site that's being dealt with under this is an EPD program. Terry Creek's being dealt with under a EPA program. And again, I would assure you it's not being ignored. I mean, these are issues that we're wrestling with and are not ignoring. So I mean, I expect that to be, a very successful project as well.
Yeah, a couple of things to add on to that. I mean, we want to get some systems installed, get them running properly, see what the results are, and then we can expand that accordingly, right? I mean, we got to kind of take it, one bite at a time, right? We can't do everything all at once. We want to get these systems installed and make sure they're running properly, and then we can expand them as necessary, kind of based on these future investigations. As far as, aquifers have an ability to naturally attenuate contamination, right? Through a variety of mechanisms. One of those is degradation. And we know degradation is going on right now. The chloroform plume started out as carbon tetrachloride, which is degraded to chloroform, and it degrades to methylene chloride, and then it goes to carbon dioxide and water. And so we're already seeing some of that degradation going on naturally in the environment. What we're trying to do is speed that process up, cut off the source, and then part of that plume is going to just naturally attenuate in the aquifer through a variety of mechanisms.
I have one other question, and still I'm talking about outside of the footprint of Hercules, but the T Street landfill, which was a part of Hercules, where they took contaminated soil and such of that nature. Has any discussion been given to that area or any?
Yeah, that's a great
plans?
question. Yeah, there's actually work going on there. Right. I mean, I think right now I saw some pictures earlier this week that showed a lot of the work that's going on. So yeah, that's a site that's being worked on, and I think it's going to be, another successful project.
So my question is for us now internally, and our engaging our populace with this information and making sure that they have this information. This would usually be a type question that would come from Commissioner Kaysen, but I'm going to step in his shoes just for a little while tonight and ask that the city make sure that we are thoroughly engaging our citizens with this information, and that they know where and how to be engaged in this process.
We would really encourage that as well. I know we have talked about doing a presentation to the EJAB board or membership as well, and we want people to know this story and to have their questions answered. So I would invite you, if you know of other groups, church groups, EJAB, whatever groups around there, we'll be happy to meet with them, either in person or virtually, and take the time to go through this. And obviously, again, we have the public meeting coming up on the 31st, and then additional opportunities as we go forward.
I think it would be a great opportunity through our MPAs to possibly get some of this information out and share it with the public, so that they will know that there is some remediation going on, that is happening, and that is, it's happening now. So I think that would be a good opportunity for you guys to come in and share that information.
We'd be happy to, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sending the PowerPoint to Naomi tomorrow, so y'all will all have that as well. But please do let us know. We'll be glad to reach out to any groups.
Mark, I'd like to say this, that a lot of the skepticism that's here is because the city and the county got together finally over Terry Creek and came together and told the folks that were supposed to be involved in cleaning up the mess out there, that we were not satisfied, that we wanted more done. The thing went to court, and Judge Baker over there turned it down, and you went the cheapest way that you could go to clean up what's out there. I'm not going to be here in 10 years, possibly. This is all getting ridiculous. It's getting nuts. We need to get together and get Brunswick clean is what we need to do. I would like to see it. I've lived here all my life. I didn't move here for fame. I didn't move here for fortune. I live here. This is my home. It's always been my home. I'm looking right out in the marsh right now at the smoke coming out of the smokestack. I'm out here looking at where the spoils were dredged up in the marsh. Right now, I can see them. Nothing's being done. Not a thing. It's time that we move forward. It really is.
I understand your frustration, and
it's more than frustration. It's all the people in this town, Mark. We just want to get it and get the thing where there's a plan. And I think that's what everybody here's asked for. Show us a plan to get this thing done.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's part of what we've done tonight and that's one reason I'm.
But 10 years to do this phase, though. 10 years.
No, well, that's one reason that, I find this process frustrating at times is, they tend to study things forever. And one of the benefits of what we talked about tonight is work is actually being done, right now as we speak. And I get it. I mean, I live here too, and I want to see work done. And that's what we're doing here. So
here's the thing, it's being put off and it's being put off, and it's cost that's doing it. It's not going to get any cheaper. It's not going to. It's only going to get more expensive. It's going to involve more people, more lives, and it needs to be planned out a lot better than what we're doing. And believe me, I think everybody here, myself included, we really appreciate this from Greg and Dwayne and you taking your time, and Patty being here. I hope she's listening to this. I really do. But it's time to let's get Brunswick so we know that it's safe. We know it's secure. It's past that time. Way past it. So.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mark, this is Mayor Harvey. I like to say the same coming from our commissioners. We all want this thing to be cleaned up, as Commissioner Kaysen says. But you answered Commissioner Williams' question when he told you that questions are coming from the citizenry. The people, our citizens are asking us these questions to ask you guys. And, realizing that your plan is for just the boundaries of Pine Knoll plant, but nothing is dealing with our environment that's already been contaminated. Realize you got to start somewhere. However, by what you're doing, you're saying we're gonna clean up our mess, then we get to yours. But that may take a 10-year time frame, as Commissioner Kaysen said. So why not? Let's try to do it all at one time. And my other question is this plan already been adopted by EPD, or is it we make an input and then you guys present this to EPD to see if they approve it?
Well, it's in front of EPD right now, but the public comments on the plan go through May 10th, and then EPD will take those comments and see what comments make sense and others might not apply, but they'll look at all the comments and address them and modify the plan if that's appropriate, and then send it back out, for a second round of comments. So it really is. It's one of the more, and I think this is from lessons learned in the past. We want to do things better. We want the public to be more involved. So, this really gives the public, I guess, 2 shots at it to make sure that the plan is right and it's right for the community and the work gets done. And, so I hope people will take advantage of that.
Let me add one thing too. Some people have mentioned, 10 years. The permit's good for 10 years, but that doesn't mean that's the last you're going to hear. We're going to hear from us, right? We're going to continue it's not like we're submitting this now and then you'll hear from us 10 years later. We're going to implement these plans. We've got the website. We're going to post documents on the website. If we need to, we can meet with you guys. You know, the plan is to implement the corrective actions, keep the public informed as to what we're doing, but we want to do it smart, right? And we can't, Mayor Harvey, I know you said, can we do it all at once? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
why is it limited
I've
in
used this
scope?
analogy in the past.
Why is
Pardon?
your plan limited in scope? Why is it just limited to just Pine Over boundaries when it's clear that this plume has also seeped past 17, under 17, and contaminate our whole area here?
Yeah, part of the issue is you want to hit the source area first and really hard so that things don't seep off the site. So, I mean, that's part of the reason to be, you know, inside the plant. Obviously, I mean, part of it's over on the east side right now with that, the barrier wall that Dwayne showed. So, yeah, I mean, we understand that, but I mean, I think part of the, and I'll let the scientists say it, but part of it, you want to hit where it's coming from right off the bat. So you get that, and then it lessens what could ever get off site in the first place.
All right. So the goal is that we are treating there along Highway 17. So that's treating the water that's flowing past Highway 17.
What is already there? The contamination is already there. So, you know, that part need to be treated just as well.
Is
Hey,
that
let
part
me
of the
ask a
OU1,
question about
OU2, and
the
OU3?
monitoring of the wells over at Terry Creek. Is that still going on? Y'all
Yes,
know?
yes, sir, it is.
What are the conclusions from that testing?
From the monitoring wells on Terry Creek?
Yes.
Yeah, Dwayne, do you want to take a shot at that? If you can. I mean, this
Those folks
it's getting a little
wells
past.
over there.
Yeah, I'm not sure we got all this at our fingertips because tonight was really more focused on the cap. But Greg, if you
Yeah. Well, so what was your question? Could you repeat your question again? I'm sorry.
Yes, the testing that is supposed to be being done over at Terry Creek for the wells over there. What's the status of that?
Well, we've got monitoring wells over there that are sampled, you know, semi-annually or annually. Is that your question?
Do you have any problems over there, or you know, at one time, the joint water sewer asked Hercules to run city service over to Terry Creek. I haven't heard anything about that in years, but somewhere it just got put under the table instead of going under the road.
Okay, I thought that might be the wells you're talking about. So those wells are sampled annually by Hercules, and we haven't found any of the site constituents in those wells.
You know, that's another thing it would be past time to bring up is trying to help those folks over there get it off of their minds what they're living with over there, and help them get some service over there for water and sewer. It'd be past time to do something like that.
Is this
Way past
OU1,
time.
OU2?
Julie, that's correct, Commissioner. I mean, that site is divided into 3 operable units. And right now the focus is OU1.
You know, you've got people that live on Terry Creek that are my age, and if something doesn't get done for them over there, they're not going to see it. You know, they've lived over there their lifetimes, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I will say we've sampled those wells annually. There's no site specific, no Hercules Pinova constituents in those wells. The plume is delineated. It doesn't extend as far as where those wells are. I mean, we know where that plume is, and it just doesn't reach out that far. And on top of that, you know, we're talking about the upper 100 feet. Those wells are significantly deeper.
Okay.
So we've got wells installed on, you know, property that Hercules owns, and, you know, we've got it delineated in that direction. And The plume has not migrated that far. I'll just stress that again. And we're talking about a much shallower zone than where those people are drawing their water supply from.
Are you touching base with the folks over there and letting them know the status of the test?
We do. We provide
Yes.
that data to them after we sample,
Okay.
as well as
Great.
providing it to EPD.
Great.
Okay,
I
now,
think
have
that
you
needed to
given
be brought up, and I appreciate it.
Yep.
have you given a briefing to Glen Environmental Coalition?
No, we have not given the presentation to Glen Environmental. Certainly happy to meet with them and talk about it if they'd
Please do.
like.
Please do.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe
Dave-
Rachel will reach out to
great
us.
questions.
Sure.
Probably listening.
Yeah, I expect she is, so I hope so.
Right.
So we do have a public meeting planned, for March 31st that will obviously get into it's a little bit longer meeting, and we can get into more detail about what we're doing during that meeting. We were just trying to give you guys the highlights of the corrective action plan today. And if we need to meet with Glen Environmental Coalition, that's certainly on the table, but we are having the public meeting, primarily for that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, but we appreciate y'all, all your.
will be there.
Yeah, we appreciate we appreciate your time and all your questions are great, and I've taken notes and we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you all.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Good
Y'all
evening.
have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Y'all do the same.
Thank you, Commissioners. That was a great discussion concerning that. We can see that we all are all concerned about our environment here. And so we're gonna stay on top of this and make sure that we don't miss this meeting on the 31st. And also any other things that needs to be. I'm just concerned that this don't go the same way the Terry Creek outfall did. What we submitted all our questions and our complaints, and it got no one really wanted to hear about them. So hopefully it don't go that way.
So we can access the virtual public meeting through their website, that herculesbrunswick.com.
I hope so. They're gonna send this to Naomi, and so we'll get a presentation so we can really figure out how we can access these things.
Okay.
I'd like to
Put it on
say,
can we put it on our website?
Yeah, and we need to let the NPAs know
Yes,
because
yes. We can maybe we can link it to our website.
Yes, yes.
Cal, take care.
I'd like to take just a minute to say, after Judge Baker's consent decree went against the city and the county's recommendations, our staff was asked to put together a commission or a group of folks. And I think, again, just like with the foul air thing, that should have been done. And I think this is another indicator right here that what we asked to get done did not get done. And we could be way ahead of the curve if we had the people involved. Just think where we are with the Planning Commission. This could be the same thing that we asked for after Judge Baker did the consent decree. So I hope that you'll get behind the folks there with me and ask them to get these people together, so we've got some people involved with the right things here.
Yes, I think Commissioner Kaysen, with the city and the county both having the same goal, and that's to clean up our whole area here, that we can appoint a commission to really dwell into that, along with Glen Environmental and EJAB, them as well, all the other environmentalists who want to come and sign up for that. So we can.
It's past time to get it done. It was over a year ago that it was asked for.
I agree. It was, but I think you're right. It was some time ago.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions, comments, commissioners, as we move forward? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Rush. Thank you, Mr. Graves, and also thank you, Mark, Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.
We genuinely look forward to working with you and, making sure this is on the tracks in a way that will be satisfactory for the community here.
All right.
Yep, absolutely. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Moving right along, commissioners, to next item is appointments. Appointments authority. One, Brunswick Housing Authority have one appointment. It's the mayor's appointment. I received a letter from Housing Authority with three names that they would like to consider to fill the unexpired term of Tatiana Cook, who is a resident commissioner. Resident commissioner means that the person has to live in Housing Authority property. Ms. Cook resides in Mercer Altima apartment complex, and the name submitted was Chester Dobson Jr. at McIntyre Court, Helen Latson at McIntyre Court, and Curtis Thomas at Mercer Altima. And these individuals have been vetted, and they was ranked by the Housing Authority. So I'm going to take the first one off the list, Mr. Chester Dobson Jr., to be submitted to for appointment as a commissioner for the Housing Authority, as a resident commissioner, excuse me. He's lived there, I think over 10 years, I believe. So he will fill the unexpired term of Ms. Tatiana Cook, which ends in 2023. The next item is Urban Redevelopment Authority. One appointment is the mayor's appointment as well. We had to fill a term. It says Sandy Dean, but Sandy Dean never was appointed to that board. We have one individual who I've met with her and talked with her, Ms. Doris Dollar Carter, for consideration of appointment to the Urban Redevelopment Agency. Madam Clerk, make sure these individuals knows their appointment, and also make sure that each organization knows so they can get the requisite training for that position.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next item is city attorney item, discussion amendment to city code of ordinance to provide for a funeral procession application. Mr. Brian Corey, our city attorney, is presenting.
Do we not accept the minutes first?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, did I get that? Missed that?
It's the minutes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. Let me back up. Consider approval of March 3rd, 2021 regular scheduled meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, I'm sorry. Motion second for the approval of March 3rd, 2020 regular scheduled meeting minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed have the same right. It appears the ayes have it. That motion carries. Now, Mr. City Attorney, your item, please.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. What you have before you is the first reading or first discussion of a amendment to the ordinances. Section. Oh, I just had it pulled up, and
14-84.
thank you very much. Which is falls within the City of Brunswick's ordinance, traffic ordinance. I just had my copy pulled up and not totally. Sorry. Okay. This came to me out of a request from the assistant city manager. I think they had been working maybe with the finance committee to talk about funeral processions and how to permit them. This is the code section you have before you tonight is primarily based on the city of West Point's. It appeared to be an appropriate amendment that was being used by another city, and there were other municipalities within the state that were using similar ordinances. Just to briefly go through it, it sets forth the definition of a funeral procession, which is the same as that defined in the state code. Just briefly, I can state that it's essentially an array of motor vehicles in which the lead vehicle displays a sign, pennant, flag, or other insignia. It sets forth other requirements in the definition, and including whether law enforcement is assisting in the procession. The second section, of course, makes for a request for the City of Brunswick Police Department to escort a funeral procession within the city limits by using the following procedure. You would be submitting, and there's an application form that we've already created. I can pull that up if necessary. To submit to the City of Brunswick Police Department seeking an escort. There would also be a small permit fee, I believe of $45 per hour per officer. This is something that was brought forth by the Finance Committee for us to look at. If there's any, I know this was submitted, and if there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to field them, but it's rather straightforward in how to apply and receive approval for a permit for a funeral procession.
Brian.
Yes.
You said per officer. I think we said it's per procession.
That's correct. I was going to tell him, I think, yeah, it's per procession.
Okay. All right.
$45.
Yeah, I'd like to make a recommendation if we can, if we could, and I don't know how that would be done through chief and the police department, but if it was a situation where, because as I said, if we have an accident or incident, our officers, of course, would have to respond to that. But if we did escorts, could it be done with off-duty officers?
Commissioner, the answer to that is, the problem is funeral processions are usually so last minute. Of course, it would be usually within 24 hours that we get the notification. And that would not be as reliable, or it'd be dependent on officers being off duty, who's willing to do it. I mean, it's a possibility, but it being set up last minute would be tougher. We handle it right now with on duty officers.
Yeah. Well, we try to, and I would, encourage, and I think if you said to the funeral homes and funeral directors, if we get a 3-day notice at least, then we could probably do it, you know what I'm saying, in that manner. But whatever works best, whatever. That's why I said it'd probably be something that you would have to answer.
My recommendation would be that we use on duty officers.
Yeah, because I would ask the question as far as the compliance with off-duty officers and the equipment that they would use for escorting.
Right. I would think that to echo that, acting under color of law, whether or not they're in their police vehicle, how they're being paid during the time in which they are assisting with the funeral procession, it'd probably be best to actually use on-duty officers. And I think it sounds like it might just be a continuation of the present practice. That would be my opinion on it.
How many officers are usually utilized for a funeral procession?
It's according to the number of cars that participate, ma'am. Usually it's a minimum of 2. And like I said, according to the number of cars participating, it could be up to 4 or 5, but usually a minimum of 2.
And how quickly do you get the information as to how many cars are going to be participating in the procession?
Usually when the officer shows up on site to see for themselves how many cars there are.
Yeah.
And this ordinance would require a 24-hour notice to submit the police escort permit. So if they were making a request, it would at least be in a 24-hour notice, and in the application form, it requests, date of escort, time of escort, the route that's taken, and the approximate number of vehicles. So it might give them a little bit more of a heads up as to how many people will be in that procession.
Didn't we say we were going to take out the number of, or the route? We're going to leave the route up to the officers based upon traffic flow and things of that?
That's correct.
They have that knowledge?
Right. I mean, I think that somebody could probably put forth a proposed route, but under the ordinance, the route will always be at the subject to the discretion of the police officer. Obviously,
Okay.
the police
Okay.
officer is going to make the decision based on public safety.
Okay.
I noticed that we did not put a fee in here, that we're gonna use our standard fee that we have in our ordinance that's have fees in the ordinance, fees.
If you look under section 14-85A2, it just states that a permit fee will be required to be paid with the application, and the fee amount will be determined by the city council and published in the city fee schedule. So upon the approval, if this is approved,
We don't have it now, do we? Yes.
Well, the discussion was $45 per procession.
Okay.
That was the recommendation.
Okay.
So right now, we're not charging at all, is that right?
Correct.
Well, I must say this, in that our residents, our citizens, our residents feel that their taxes pays for some of this service that they should be getting. And this one service that they feel that it should be afforded to them by paying their taxes here in the city.
Well, I understand and hear what you're saying on that, Mr. Mayor, but I would disagree with that. That is not an extension of services, and go to any other state and you will see it for yourselves.
I know, you're right. I've seen that too. You're right, I have.
That is not an extension of services.
Our citizens kind of feel that it is.
I would agree.
You know, this commissioner feels that way also as a taxpayer, and this is something that we've done. There's a precedent set, and I don't think that I don't have a problem with having some procedure in place, but as far as to having a charge to do this, I don't think it's in our best interest as a small South Georgia town. I really don't.
I also think this
We got culture.
This can be passed. The funeral home, when they're making that this fee is passed.
They'll pass the cost on to the customer.
Exactly. You're right. I think that's what really happens. So,
Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, if you remember, if any of you were on the commission, it's probably 10 or 12 years ago that was brought in front of the commission. And at the time, the commission voted it down. Now, some funeral homes, I can't say all, but some funeral homes do already charge the customers or the family an escort fee.
Right.
They keep that fee and do not forward it on to the city, county, or whichever agency handles the escort. So just something to consider.
Okay.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that we don't charge a fee because we're not charged. So we don't charge a fee to the family or anyone else for escorts. But and I spoke with the director and the owner of Martin's Funeral Home, who I work with, and told him that this would probably be coming down the pipe. And he said he didn't have a problem. He just, if we pay, we just want to make sure that we're going to be able to get that escort. And that was the other thing that I said during the finance committee meeting, that if, we pay that fee and for whatever reason, there's an accident or whatever the case may be, and the officers, can't escort us, then how would the reimbursement work? Or does it apply to the next, you know what I'm saying? So that we get the coverage that we're paying for, if we're going to pay. Because a lot of times if we don't get an escort, we just try to move, with as cautiously and as carefully as possible, going through traffic lights and things are going, but we have to obey the traffic signs and the traffic, so it gets a little sticky sometimes when we don't have that escort.
Sure.
So, Chief, what you're saying is during a moment of
Bereavement.
grief, some funeral services have a line item on the bill for escort services, whether or not there's ever an escort.
They used to, ma'am. Like I said, when that was presented, I think it was Chief Johnson presented that years ago. And I was the one that put together the information. And at the time, some funeral homes did have a line item charging the family for escort. And that was part of the presentation, was that the city should get paid for that money. But also another consideration, while I have the microphone, is I checked with the county yesterday and they do not charge a fee for their escorts. And remember, a lot of times they go from city to county or county into city. So just something to consider if the county's not charging and we do, just something to think about.
So you're talking about situations where the county has a escort service that brings the group, the attendees over the bridge into Brunswick for the actual burial?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Maybe the service is out on the spur at Chapman's Funeral Home, and say the person is going to be buried in Palmetto Cemetery. The county will escort them to the city line or close by. The city will pick them up and then bring them on in, or vice versa. We'll escort to the bridge or out to 341. The county will pick them up and take them on to the cemetery.
Wow. So that's hitting both jurisdictions. So,
Yes, ma'am.
interesting. Okay.
Well, we have this, and we will take a look at this, and if we feel very strongly about that fee, I think we should, as we come forth next time with this, we should bring that forth to either get a change or let it stay.
Yeah.
Well, I have one other
and if you want to know what funeral homes actually charge those escort services or charge for them, all you got to do is go and ask for a price list, and by law, they have to give it to you.
Okay.
I'm just curious also, Chief Jones, what's in general, the average length of time that two officers might be pulled out to go do an escort service for a funeral?
Sometimes it's a little longer for the city, ma'am, as a lot of families will request that they be escorted, say, from the home or a gathering place or a church to the funeral home. And then they have the service at the funeral home, and then we will come back, pick them up and escort them to the graveside. So it could be as quick as 30 minutes. It could be as long as both of those combined, a couple of hours. So sometimes we do just one escort, sometimes it's two escorts for the same family.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting.
So if I could, I would say that it seems like there is not a consensus to advertise. At least there's a discussion or a question out there regarding the fee. And I would say that regardless of the fee, I do think this ordinance would be beneficial to the city in that it sets forth policies and procedures that might, assist in keeping it organized and maybe giving the police department a little bit greater of a heads up. So, I guess I'm asking whether or not it's something that the city wants to go ahead and advertise, or whether there needs to be an additional discussion on the permit fee.
I don't have a problem with the ordinance. Again, I do have a problem with charging.
Brian, I would say too, and you're saying 24 hours, and I guess Chief is saying 24-hour notice, but I would ask for at least a 48-hour notice, at least a day or two, because if I'm having a service, I know, I know I have a service on Saturday. Today is Wednesday. I've been knowing this since Monday, so we get that information to the city, let them know that we would need an escort, time, place, and all those things for Saturday.
So Brian, would you maybe move this forward with just the caveat in that section 14-87 that a person seeking issuance of a City of Brunswick Police Department police escort, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually it's the filing period, that the payment of the permit fee, if applicable, just, can you leave that part open-ended?
Yeah, I mean, it's mentioned twice, actually. It's further up as well.
Okay.
It's in 14-85A2. A permit fee may be required to be paid with the application. The fee amount will be determined by the city council and published in the city fee schedule.
Okay.
You could say if a fee is required, and and if applicable, or something like that. To unless you want to just take the whole sentence out. It seems that we had a little discussion on it, but we haven't voted upon what we really want to do with that.
Mr. Mayor, I think that, if you put if a fee is applicable in there,
Yeah, you're right.
somebody's gonna want to know, well, what makes it applicable? Why do I have to pay
Yeah,
it?
you're right, Commissioner. You're so right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So right.
Either we're gonna charge the fee or we're not. If we're not, that's fine. If we're going to, that's fine. But again, if we try to do, leave it open ended, then
you'd have to put some quantity of. You'd have to qualify the fee. You'd have to, whether it be $25 for a, procession requiring only a, singular escort, and you'd have to ratchet it up from there. If there's 50 cars, then it requires. So I do think you'd have to have some definition and some qualifying language in there.
Well, we or any future commission can always amend this ordinance as they see fit. So I would agree if we probably should take that out if that's what we decide.
May I make one other suggestion? Is that we coordinate with the county, particularly the police department, because right now the procedure is the funeral homes send the request for escort to dispatch. And if it is just us or just the county, it's a lot easier. But if it involves both agencies, it complicates things. So I would suggest that we make this as simple as possible. So the funeral home is not having to send one form to BPD and then send another form to dispatch for them to give it to the county. It's just going to make it confusing. So if we could coordinate with the county and have the same procedure, that way it's a lot simpler for the funeral homes, it saves a lot of complications and just makes things simpler for the officers and the police departments that are doing the escorts.
Can you check with the county and see if they've got a procedure, and let's see what they've got?
The procedure right now, sir, is the funeral homes just send the escort request to dispatch, and dispatch figures out if it needs to go to the city police, county police, or a combination of both.
But the county doesn't have a procedure. Is that what you're saying?
To the best of my knowledge, sir, what I just told you is the way it works for the city and county. Is sent to dispatch.
So
it'd be good to have it together. It would be good to have it together.
Yes, you have to fax it in to the county and to the city.
Right.
Well, you fax it into 911. I think that's who it goes to. Am I correct, Chief?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then they dispatch the officers to whatever the service is when that time comes. So we usually, from what's going on now, is usually 24 hours prior to the service. And I'm thinking if we did it at 48 hours, that would give us time to coordinate whatever needs to be coordinated and everything, and move it forward.
Chief, is there a specific form that's used now, or is it just a call or a request that's made?
The best of my knowledge, ma'am, there's not a form. It's just a call that's made. And then that may have changed in the last few years. I've not been involved directly with funeral escorts, but used to anyway, it was just a call that was made to dispatch saying, hey, we need escort from point A to point B tomorrow at 11 a.m.
What they ask us to do now, Chief, is we fax it in. We have to fax it to them ahead of time so that they'll have it and they get that request via fax.
Okay, very good.
So that's for the city and the county. You fax it in?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do the same thing if I'm going to Camden County and I need Camden County to pick me up at the Wilson-Tiller River. I fax to Camden County as well. They coordinate with Glenn County. When Glenn County gets us to that point, they drop us off and Camden County picks us up.
Well, I think it'd be a good thing to check with the county and see if they would like to duel with us on this and have the same policy, procedure, ordinance, whatever, and get on with it.
Commissioner
What I'm hearing is it's likely, sounds like we should not advertise at the moment. It sounds like we need to bring a little bit more information back before finalizing the form to be advertised. Is that fair?
I see where it can help the police department to have something in place like this. I really do. And help the people that are requesting the service.
Yeah.
Don't see where it's helping them to charge a fee though.
But it still really bothers me about the charge from some of the
Somebody's
funeral
getting paid.
homes. Does that not bother anybody else?
Well, and this is what I'm saying, Julie, if you want to know what funeral homes actually charge those fees, which I don't know. I don't think any of them at this point does.
Okay.
But if you want to check, all you got to do is ask them for a price list, and they supposed to provide that to you automatically, and you can go down that price list and ask them, okay, what's this, and then they supposed to tell you. So, and if they don't tell you, then they're in violation of state code and state law.
We're talking about a competitive business also, so they should be pretty consistent, shouldn't it?
Should be.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, maybe you can get that list for us. Just ask that question to the funeral homes and get the list and provide it to us.
Or even Chief Jones, if
Chief
somebody
Jones.
has.
Anyone can get it and provide it to us.
Yeah, anybody can get it. You can go to any funeral home and just ask for their price list.
Well, we can call them and ask the same thing and get it.
Yeah.
Chief, will you take care of that for us?
Yes, sir. I'll take care of it.
Okay, great.
And to your question, Brian, no, I don't think we need to advertise at this moment. We'll certainly take it back and look at the county and also the process and whether there needs to be a requirement for a form for the city.
Okay.
Thank you for addressing this.
Yes. Any other further questions for Brian, for our city attorney?
So will this come back as a public hearing?
No, but we won't advertise it yet. So it'll come
Okay.
back as like an additional first reading is what it would need to come back as. And then it would need to be advertised, and that's when there could be a public, input, and then the last it would be for approval. But I think it sounds like we might need to bring it back. I say second reading, we'll bring the first reading back for a second time with additional information.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Is that okay with everybody?
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, we seem to have come to the end of our scheduled printed agenda. I want to thank everybody for the input on this funeral procession ordinance that we're trying to work out. It's really a testament that we get into the nuts and bolts of things to try to make things better for our constituents, and we really try to do that, try to make things better for our whole community here. I appreciate you, Chief Jones, and City Attorney, and all the commissioners and City Manager and everybody concerned.
Finance Committee brought this to us. That's a good thing.
Yes, Finance Committee, for sure. Yeah, thank you. all.
Okay.
And Ms. Myers worked on this as well. She worked.
Good.
Good discussion.
Rah, rah. That's good.
She
Teamwork.
sought out the additional municipalities that were using something like this and brought it forth.
Good job.
Okay, well, thank everybody for what you do. This commission is really good. And we got great leadership here, and the staff is great. Thank you, City Manager, for your staff as well. Okay, we come to the end of our regular printed agenda. Is there a need for executive session?
Yes, for real estate and litigation.
Okay, I get a motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to executive session for real estate and, what did you say, Brian?
Litigation.
And litigation.
Second.
Motion second for us to go into executive session for litigation and real estate. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same right. Hearing up on the opposing side, we will adjourn to executive session, and afterwards we will come back and adjourn our meeting here in the regular session. So I'll see you all on the other side. We adjourn till executive session. Wow, I made it. I made it.
I feel a little bit like Harry Potter being able to apparate here and there.
Is everybody on board?
I don't see Kaysen.
Okay.
I don't see Williams.
Yeah.
We've been at this since 5 o'clock, everybody.
It's a long night.
It has been.
I guess it's what you call it, short agenda, but a long discussion.
Yes. You know, you guys really discuss things and it really brings things out, and that's really, really good at times, because we get into the nuts and bolts of things. And I'm pretty sure the people who are on board with us listening to our meeting know that we really discuss things. The county, I think they may discuss things in their work sessions, I imagine they have before their meetings, but we really get involved. When they have their meetings, they rarely discuss hardly anything.
Yeah.
But we get involved with stuff, and I like that.
I'm excited about the updating of the ordinances.
That's a lot of hard grinding work. That really is.
Yes.
They've done a great job.
Yes.
Yes. We haven't done that in years, and we need
Yeah.
to do that. I think we're moving forward. I think we turned the corner and we're moving forward and we're becoming who we want to become. I think our priorities are really straight. I think we're going in the right direction. And I know we're recording, so I guess we best kind of wait until we get the other folks here. We'll give them another minute, and then after that, we have 3, so we'll just move forward if they don't come on board. Okay, hopefully they'll join us later. We'll return back from executive session. We discussed litigation and real estate. And now there's an item that we need to add to our agenda. And that item is anybody want to get the item?
I guess it's the item regarding the Liberty Ship Park and DNR.
Yeah, okay, we add that. And also we need to
MSA.
add item concerning the resolution for our MSA that we need to provide for the federal legislation.
I make a motion that we add those 2 items as presented.
Second.
Motion second to add those 2 items. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, have the same right. Okay, we have those 2 items for discussion. Madam City Manager will discuss item number 2. So item number 1, is there a motion on the table?
I'd like to make a motion that we execute the consent order number CMPA 2021-0003 with the Department of Natural Resources regarding the dock work at Liberty Ship Park.
Second.
Motion second for us to for the approval of the CMPA 2021-0003 with the DNR. Are there any further comments or questions? At Liberty Ship Park, excuse me. Hearing all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same right. Hearing none from the opposing side, that motion carries. Now, the other item number 2, concerning our MSA, our city manager, Ms. Regina McDuffie, is presenting.
Good evening. This was first brought to our attention by the BATS Policy Committee, and it basically is a change that is being considered in terms of changing the designation of a metropolitan area to 100,000 population versus where it is right now, which is the 50,000. And it would adversely impact us because it would take us out of, and I don't know in terms of our entitlement, but I know it would take us out of consideration for the requirements for our MPO, and it would take the considerations that we have for making transportation decisions locally to a level higher than here. So the mayor wrote a letter supporting the opposition of this change. And I think, as Ms. Meyer said, that reporting period or comment period will be over this week. So I don't think we have the opportunity to initiate a resolution, but we have already, stated our opposition, and we've also contacted our state legislators about it and made sure that they were aware that, what the impact on the city and the county would be.
Well, you're right. Go ahead.
Ms. McDuffie, I was gonna ask, is there any way that we could maybe get a copy of the letter that the mayor sent and we all signed that as well?
I thought it was sent out. Naomi, was that not sent out?
I got a copy.
Yes, he sent a copy, but I think he's saying for everyone to have signed it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can do that, and we probably could get that in before the end of the week. So I will send out something tomorrow, but we will have to get it signed quickly because Friday is the last day for information to be sent.
So if we come in to City Hall to sign it, do we see Naomi or Deshani?
Yes. We'll make sure, I'll make sure it's in Naomi's office.
Okay.
Okay.
So tomorrow it'll be available and we can come in and sign tomorrow.
Yeah, after about, I guess, 10 o'clock.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
And we will forward that. And, we have basically, I think there was a article in the paper about it. And the chamber also has submitted a letter, as well as the county. And I think Jekyll Island Authority has also submitted letters.
Virginia, can you DocuSign it?
Probably not.
Well, it would not be, I mean, we can, yeah, I think we can do that, especially if you have a kind of authentic signature. Naomi and I will talk about that in the morning. And
if you can't, I'll come down there and sign it, but it'd be a way to do it. I love to use that technology.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it in the morning, and we'll make sure we get the word out as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I want everybody to know, yeah, this does affect us quite a bit. It affects if we continue to have our designation. I think we are one of 7 cities, MSAs in the state of Georgia, I think, and it means that you get direct funding from the federal level directly to us instead of having to go through the state to ask for funding with all the other cities and so forth.
Yeah.
What's the downside? Is there a downside?
The downside is we will compete for funding from the state versus having entitlement directly to us.
Okay.
Right.
And we'll that's just for transportation.
No, that's for everything. I mean, this is a designation that gives us, just like in that award that they made recently with the American Rescue Plan, we were included as a metropolitan area where we got, you know, a designation of funding directly, as the mayor said. And this would take us out of that direct funding line. And it also would take us out of, you know, directly having input on our transportation planning and other aspects. I mean, it would put us in a category where we were, I guess, giving us less opportunity for, you know, making our own decisions.
Okay.
And I
Gotcha.
think I think with our entitlement status as well.
Yes, you're right.
Sure. Okay.
So we will do that. Thank you, Madam City Manager. And we will come down and sign that so they know the force of our backing in this matter. Are there anything else need to be brought before this commission before I ask for adjournment? Well, thank you all for attending and that all is well. So with all that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. Any further comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Good evening, everybody.
Aye.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
night, everybody.
Thank you.
See you on the other side.
All right, good night.
All right, good night.